This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Welcome, Gary. How are you?
Mark,
good to be back. Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Thank you, by the way, for the reaction we get for Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. It's actually quite gratifying. The thousands of people are watching and responding, and we thank you. It's become quite a phenomena, and we love to do it. And one of the reasons we love to do it is like today, when you've got a very interesting subject. First, do you have the picture of the lawyer, I guess you can call him disgraced lawyer, Murdaugh, who's in South Carolina, I believe, and was denied bail today? Do you have a picture of this?
I will have it in just a moment. I sent this to you earlier.
Because I'm sure Drew would have something to say about this. The guy is apparently, as many people know, his wife and his son were murdered. He then had an attempt on his life a couple of months after that. Turns out, at least if you believe the prosecutors, that he orchestrated that attempt on his life in a way to get, in a method to get insurance money back. And then look at this. Now, if you saw a before and after, this is incredible.
He's looking really good. I mean, he's obviously the treatment center that he was going to was doing good work, whether or not, at least physically. No phone calls, no hassles, 30 days, get a little leaned out. It's amazing. Anyway, I got to be honest, yeah. Mark. I've had a few friends go through those programs and go to some of those places in Malibu, and I've gone out to visit them. It's wild. It looks awesome. I mean, I've
personally delivered clients to the ones in Malibu, and I've said to I can't tell you how many times I've used the line, could I just check in for like 45 days?
Mark, I was hanging out. I went to go visit a friend, and I was hanging out with him for about an hour, and then dinner time came around, and this chef pops up out of nowhere, and it's like, what would you guys like for dinner? And I was like, I don't know. What are you making? And my friend goes, no, you just order anything you want, just anything you can think of. I was like, are you serious? What is this place? I need 10 days here once a month.
It's astonishing. Anyway, he looks good. The problem is he's been denied bail.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the prosecutor was quoted in the bail hearing today, telling the judge,
quote, this is the tip of the iceberg. There is far more we will reveal soon. That's aggressive. Yeah. That's aggressive for a legal record.
Really aggressive, because if you're a prosecutor, you don't want to make, a lot of prosecutors will blow off a lot of hot air just to keep somebody detained. But, that's going to come back to bite you if it's not true. My guess is, and you and I have been saying this as long as we've been covering this story, there is a lot more here than they have revealed. And sure enough, every time there's a story, it seems like they're peeling the onion again, and it gets even worse and worse and worse. If you believe, like I say, everybody's presumed innocent, although the lawyers have done, I think, a good job, Dick Harpootlian and the others, in kind of confess and avoid that. They've talked about the opioid addiction being exacerbated by the murders, and that he had nothing to do, and that he wanted to cooperate, and that the opioid addiction is what caused the embezzlement. I guess that's to some degree, kind of a mitigation. You can tell that they're setting up a situation, I think, to try to work out some kind of a plea. And that's presumably where they're headed. But like the prosecutor says, I suspect, I don't want to sound like a prosecutor, but I suspect there's a lot more going on here.
Me too, absolutely. And, you would have a better read on it than I would, but I would think that if I'm Dick or Alex or any of the people involved in this, I'm hating the amount of media coverage, and obviously we're contributing to it. But every time, something breaks in this story, there's more and more coverage, and that's going to lead, I would say, to a much less lenient deal, probably, because they don't want to be seen as soft, wouldn't you think?
I think that's exactly right. And I will tell you, the way that this case is unfolding, what happens with the murder investigation of his wife and his son will either kind of leapfrog this into the supersized case category or not. And I suspect that they have a pretty good idea as to where that's headed in terms of the investigation.
One would think. And, it's given the nature of those crimes, it's just and from day one, he has always been a person of interest, as named, even though he apparently gave what at the time was a very good alibi for the incident. So we'll certainly be.
Yeah. And if I'm going to speculate, I'm going to go back to what I've been speculating without any basis whatsoever. The opioid addiction, the opioid addiction that they're alleging, to me, does not account for the massive amounts of money that are being alleged as having been embezzled. And I just wonder, and I've suspected, from the beginning that there was something else going on, whether it was gambling or something else, and that the homicides of the wife and the son were in some way, shape, or form related to somebody trying to collect money. And I think my guess is that clearly that's what the cops are working on. That's kind of their motive. When they ascribe a motive and a working kind of theory, I've got to believe that that's what they think is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always, if you're going to speculate without basis, then I'll do it too. I've always thought that this was gambling. I mean, the nature of the murders and the way that they were done with separate weapons and stuff like that, to me, means you are trying to send a message to a survivor. You are trying to convey fear into someone that is going to remain after this crime.
Right. And obviously, when this was first coming out, we suspected it was large amounts of money, just because generally, if somebody's going to do collection efforts of this kind of crazy amount or crazy degree, that is going to be correlated to a large amount of money. That's my speculation. Now we'll go from the ridiculous to the sublime. The January 6th subpoenas and the referral today of Steve Bannon first to the House. What happened today was the January 6th committee had subpoenaed Steve Bannon, who was the erstwhile and then came back in again as Trump advisor. They continue to look into the January 6th uprising, insurrection, melee, riot, whatever word you want to use. Overthrow of the government, I think, is the current topic or the current characterization. He has said he's not going to comply with the subpoena and did not. And so the House committee, there's a subcommittee of the House that recommended to the full House that it get referred to the Department of Justice. The full House will have to vote on that. Interestingly, that's because the House has never enacted, and this is somewhat surprising to me, apparently the authority to find a contempt themselves. So if you commit a contempt, whether direct or indirect, in a courtroom, the court has the ability, you have to jump through a number of hoops, but has the ability to initiate contempt proceedings against you. Been there, done that numerous times, both directed my way and at my clients.
Thanks to this podcast, I bet.
Yes, exactly. Reasonable doubt has put me in the crosshairs several times. The interesting thing is that President Biden, a couple of days ago, when there was speculation that Bannon was not going to comply, or telegraphed that, or said he wasn't going to comply, had said that the Department of Justice should prosecute him. And that got a real pushback from the Department of Justice.
Yeah, their quote was, the Department of Justice will make its own independent decisions in all prosecutions based solely on the facts and the law, period, full stop. That's aggressive.
Yeah. Well, it's aggressive, but you know what? For the same people who were complaining about Trump's relationship with Attorney General Barr and that department, that iteration of the Department of Justice, should applaud that, because they are drawing a line in the sand.
To be clear, I do applaud it. I think it's aggressive for someone who is a political player to go against the president that appointed them in that manner and in such aggressive statement, period, full stop. That was what I meant, but I do applaud it. I want my Department of Justice separate and making its own decisions based on the things. If they're going to do it based on what they just said in that statement, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. And by the way, the Ted Lieu then, who's from California, push back hard on the Department of Justice statement. Do you have that, what he said?
I can, if you give me just a second here, I'll find the exact quote.
Interestingly, Ted Lieu had introduced, I want to say this year, I forget what it was called. It was like the Inherent Contempt of Court Act or something along those lines, where he was proposing that Congress has its own contempt power, which to me makes sense. I don't know why Congress, as a co-equal branch of government, has to be dependent or subservient to another branch of government to enforce a subpoena that is issued to the executive branch. It makes very little sense to me, although I suppose there is the argument constitutionally that, well, the Congress has got the judicial branch so they can go to court and they can get that done. But we saw what happened during the Trump administration in years past, that gets tied up. And by the time you finish up with the appeals, the issue is already done with generally.
So I have Ted Lieu's quote here. He tweeted after Biden made his statements, and this first part is in all caps. Congress should not need to depend on another branch of government to enforce our subpoenas, period. Full stop. I like that wordplay there. Now back to regular capitalization. We need to pass the Inherent Contempt Bill by Representatives Jamie Raskin, Madeline Dean, Joe Newski, excuse me if I'm screwing that one up, Val Demings, and David Cicilline, and me. Just like courts, we have our own contempt authority.
Yeah, I there's a good argument for that. There's a good argument that at least when it's the executive branch that you're talking about. I mean, this is kind of the nettlesome thing here. And for those who are into the separation of powers, there's a subpoena that was issued by Congress that was directed at Steve Bannon. Now, Steve Bannon at the time, January 6th, leading up to January 6th, was not a member of the executive branch, although he was before. But apparently they are invoking the fact that President Trump has invoked executive privilege. Executive privilege is that he's saying my consultations are protected by the privilege, like an attorney-client, like a physician-patient, clerical privilege. The argument against that is, well, no, you don't. Steve Bannon was outside of the executive branch at the time you were having these conversations. He wasn't an advisor to you. He wasn't Jared Kushner. He wasn't Ivanka. The problem with that argument, and one of the problems that the Department of Justice is going to have, is that going back almost 14 years, Paul Clement, I believe it was Paul Clement, who was then in either the Department of Justice or Solicitor General, I forget when, had already opined that there could exist executive privilege over somebody who's not in the executive branch, that you want a president to consult with experts, that he shouldn't be closed in on a kind of a circumscribed universe of people to talk to, that if he needs to talk to people that are outside of the White House, that are outside of the executive branch, that therefore there should be some kind of protection to that. There's an argument there. That's not frivolous.
Think he had Bannon in mind?
Yeah, I don't think they expected Bannon, but that's pretty much how the law develops.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a principle that's established, people accept it, and then somebody pushes the envelope on the principle, and then you see how it plays out. So careful listeners of Reasonable Doubt have heard you point that out once every 3 months for the entire 7 years we've been doing this show. Yeah, it's an interesting morphology of the law, and it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. And who knows? We may get some of the principles on in the coming weeks. Well, I apologize to those who might have been hoping to see Ace Man today. The schedule was just absolutely out of control. But I'm going to tease a little surprise. We may have the best hour in the universe in studio and early this week. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, Gary. Always good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Mark. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.